Olasile Adedoyin. I'm presently a PhD student in the Department of Computer Education and Instructional Technology from Near East University here in northern part of Cyprus. The topic I'll be presenting today is is on national policy on OER for higher education in Nigeria, evaluation of institutional compliance rate. So basically, I will talk about the introduction part, then the literature review, which is going to be focused on the policy itself, then the methodology, then I'll then talk about the findings and then talk about the conclusion. So the introduction aspect now, Nigeria as a country actually joined the rest part of the world to tap in from the potentials of OER by producing the first West African draft of a national policy on OER, which was adopted by the National University Commission and then successfully presented at the Second World OER Congress in Slovenia. The National University Commission is the body that is regulating national institutions in Nigeria, more especially the universities. So since the presentation and the adoption of this national policy in 2017 to date, there has been an absence of a research attention on the compliance rates by universities in the country. So this particular study will basically explore institutional compliance rates with a specific provision of the national policy on a whole year for higher education. And this provision is talking about the infrastructure and connectivity goal of the policy, which states that all higher institutions of learning in Nigeria must have their own or institutional repositories. So then from this slide, I talked about the definition of national policy, where I stated that a national policy refers to an official declaration covering the ideologies and a comprehensive course of action approved by the national government of the country in the quest of accomplishing certain objectives. And these policies are applied to channel decision making in the direction of accomplishing the identified outcome based on the definition given by Better Care Network. And out of several national policies in operation in Nigeria, the focus of this study is basically on national policy on OER for higher education. So the significance of the study now, the core significance of the study is to evaluate the institutional compliance rate to the OER policy on infrastructure and connectivity goal of having institutional repositories. And it will effectively provide an overview of how well the national policy on OER for higher education performs one of its basic functions. And then the study will also assist in determining the achievement of objectives connected to the OER advancement, improve policy implementation, provide accountability to major stakeholders of the country's education sector, increase global aid for OER initiatives. And it also has add to the body of literature on OER policies and also inform potential reforms, modifications, and changes to the existing policy. To achieve the above target, the following research questions were raised. One, what is the current institutional compliance rate for OER in universities in Nigeria? What are the likely factors that can be responsible for the current compliance rate and the likely solutions? So the national policy on OER for higher education in Nigeria as packaged by the National University Commission in 2017, provides a complete outline for the application of OER by giving the guiding principles for using and creating OER to improve the right of entry to and promote qualitative education and explorations in the Nigerian tertiary institutions of learning. So the policy is divided into 11 core sections. The first section focuses on the scope of the policy, followed by the goals of the policy, the capacity development, OER material development, quality assurance, infrastructure and connectivity goal, which is talking about institutional repositories. So this paper is focused on this section, which is infrastructure and connectivity, which stated that all universities in Nigeria, all higher institutions of learning in Nigeria must have their institutional OER repositories. Then the implementation strategy, teaching and learning, institutional structures, Creative Commons license and scope. And the last part of the section, which is intellectual property right and licenses, and then liability and disclaimer. So the goals of the policy now, there are four basic goals of this policy. One, promotion of access to and development of quality instructional resources that aids quality teaching and learning in tertiary institutions. Two, goal number two, eradication of barriers to education that includes course, access, format, and language. Three, promotion of free access to instructional resources that can be repurposed or reused in several designs. The last one, which says that to encourage a healthy academic culture of knowledge sharing. So the research method used here is explorative study with descriptive design technique. So the secondary data used are gotten from the National University Commission's website and also from an open DOAR, an official database for open access directories. So the study population now are all National University Commission approved and accredited universities in Nigeria, while the study samples are focusing on all universities with institutional repositories. So the data analysis now we use the compliance rates formula and then frequency and percentage, simple percentage. So the findings now, the number of the total number of universities approved and licensed in Nigeria, we have the federal universities having 49 49 they are 49 in number, raking in 22.6% of the whole number of approved universities in Nigeria. We also have state-owned universities that have they are 57 in number with 26.3%. We also have private universities which have 111. There are 111 units with 51.1%. So the number of private universities are even more than the universities established by both states and the federal government of Nigeria. So we have 217 universities that are approved and licensed by the National University Commission as far back as 2022. So the descriptive statistics of universities with OER based on the data gotten from the secondary data gotten from Open DOAR. So we have universities that have repositories and their repositories are active. We also have universities that have repositories, but their repositories are not active as well. So we during the course of analyzing this data, we visited all the repositories to actually confirm if they are active or not. So with what we have there, we have 20 universities with institutional OER repositories, but only 17 universities have active OER repositories. Active in what sense? They are the repositories are still active, and the OERL active. But on the other side, where we have inactive, there are three universities with repositories, but the OER the link is inactive, so we are unable to access the repositories. So we concluded on sticking with the 17 that have active OER repositories. So the compliance rate now, the formula we use is the total number of universities, the total number of approved universities minus the non-compliance. So we have 217 universities. We have 17 of them that have active institutional OER repositories. So the number of universities with no OER repositories are 200. So after the calculation, we discovered that 7.83% of registered and approved universities in Nigeria have institutional repositories. So from the above calculation, it is obvious that the compliance rate, which is 7.83% is regrettably low compared to the remaining 92.2% of non-compliance with the national policy on OER when it comes to connectivity goal of infrastructure and connectivity goal of having institutional repositories. So from there, we move on to the factors, the likely factors that can be responsible for the current institutional compliance rate. We talk the issue of lack of political will to make sure that institutions comply with national policies is not. We discover that it's part of the major problem of factors. It's part of the major factors that can be responsible for the low compliance rate. Another one is the cost of compliance with new policy. Most of the institutions have their budget, so coming up with new policy now, they will have to spend more to comply with most of the provisions of the new policy. So most of them feel like feel the body additional burden of making provisions for how to comply on the compliance with the new policy. The negative attitude of institutions towards compliance as well. We also have unidentified other relevant agencies of government. According to the policy spoke about the other relevant agencies of government that will actually contribute to the compliance of universities to the policy. But the policy itself failed to actually made mention of or list the names of the relevant other relevant agencies of government. So it becomes an issue of institutions going after having to go extra mile to establish which or who or what institutions are going to be responsible for those actions. So the absence of policy compliance assessment mechanism as well. So the policy was just put in place. There was no policy compliance assessment mechanism put in place to actually measure the compliance rate of institutions. We also have poor funding. As we all know, one of the major issues of OER movement is sustainability, which is talking about how the movement can be funded to make sure that the goal of OER keep on moving forward. So the issue of a poor funding is a very big issue in Nigeria, because as far back as the past 3 or 4 regimes that we've had in Nigeria, only the regime of the former president Goodluck Ebele Jonathan was able to meet up with the UNESCO recommendation for budget on education. Other that have come before him and the one we have presently, still they are still unable to meet up with the requirement of the UNESCO on education funding. We also have an unverifiable implementation as part of the factors. We discovered that most of the most of those that are in charge of this policy when it comes to from the perspective from the end of the National University Commissions just go on or come up with information that are not very valuable because one of these unverifiable implementation is talking about NUC coming, the representative of NUC coming out to state that they have millions of OER in their in the national repository, and we during the course of conducting this study, several mails were sent to the NUC to actually provide the link or the URL for the national repository, in which they did not respond to the mail. And then I also went on to also search for the link online. It was it was nowhere to be found. So they claim unverifiable implementation as well. So talking about from there we move on to the solutions to all these problems stated earlier. We also we propose that institutional compliance and evaluation system should be put in place to actually measure the compliance rate, and then so that we'll be able to keep universities on their toes when it comes to compliance with the national policy on OER. We also suggest that there should be improved funding, and then generation and promotion of political will, positive attitudinal disposition towards compliance, and then the education of other relevant agencies of government that the policy itself failed to hammer on. Then the conclusions now. Findings from this study indicated that the compliance rate is regrettably low, and the factors responsible for the poor compliance rate can also be associated with the general challenges confronting education as a major sector. It is commendable that as a country, Nigeria has been able to come up with a strong and viable national policy on OER that is free from nebulous objectives and goals like in the past. So the symbol of policy realization is dependent on the actualization of the desired goals of every public policy, and it is globally supported that actualization of educational policy goals and objectives is dependent on effective and efficient implementation and compliance, which are core determinants for evaluating the impact of every public policy. So the limitations and future research opportunities now. This study assesses institutional compliance to a specific provision of the national policy on OER for higher education. The data applied in this study is limited to secondary data, and the factors suggested here are based on extant literature on general policy implementation and compliance in Nigeria as a developing country. However, this does not, by in any implication, give condemnation to the findings of the study. So thus, it is recommendable that future study direction can focus on establishing research instruments such as interviews, surveys, where faculty and higher education administrators would provide primary data on factors that can be responsible for low compliance rates, and also assess compliance with other provisions of the policy, of the national policy on OER for higher education in Nigeria. So I have my references as well. I'm done. Thank you for listening.
Ola, I think the PowerPoint was stuck on the first slide only. It would be actually great if you just go through the slides really quickly in like 3 minutes or 2 minutes, just for people to see what you've spoken about. Thanks so much.
Okay. Yes. This is the introduction part where I spoke about when and how Nigeria came up with the national policy on OER that was developed by the National University Commission. And then I spoke about how can you see the screen now?
Yeah, I can see the slide of the agenda. I guess because we do not have actually time, it would be great just to go through the slides and the title of each slide.
Oh, okay.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Can you see the introduction part?
Unfortunately, no.
Wow.
I still can see the agenda slide.
I don't know if
In fact, if you share the PowerPoint, maybe we can share it with other participants and then they
no
can
problem.
have a
I
look.
can share it. I can share it then. Do I how do I drop that? I need to go to tools. How do I drop the